put together what would be considered, what would show the city's purpose for each location. Sorry. So zoning regulation must follow the comprehensive plan. Zoning regulations are designed to protect the health and general welfare, among other things, per section 211 of the governing code. Lubbock's most recent comp plan is referred to as the 2040 plan. We'll learn a little bit more about that a little bit further as we go. Here's a breakdown of each category in which it can be zoned. Each area is given a code to identify the type of zoning it will fall under, which I'd like to focus on right now, the R1, which is residential, and the M2, which would be heavy manufacturing. So far, what we know is that zoning would be used to divide residential from industrial, correct? So this is the current zoning map in Lubbock. In the map, the light and dark gray areas signify the M1 and M2, which are your manufacturing. The yellow signifies R1 and R2, which is residential. And while this map is zoomed in, pay close attention to the city's divide and where the concentration of gray is. So again, our main focus today is specifically codes R1 and M2. So this is basically what R1 would be. R1 gives permissions for residential. When you think residential, you think 3 to 5 bedroom homes, grassy areas for parks, things of that nature. Exactly what you would want when you think single family. Now, the M2 is going to be the heavy manufacturing. As we see in the picture here, that's an example of what we're surrounded by over here in East and North Lubbock. And M2 is going to focus on manufacturing. These companies deal with things like steel, oil, chemicals, and also your concrete batch plants, cottonseed plants, factories that decimate smoke, soot, and are also a hazard to health, and not to mention, not very appealing to the eye. So how do we get here? The zoning decision makers are going to be elected by us into city council, and those people make the final decisions in regards to passing ordinances and appropriating funds. The council appoints a planning and zoning committee who focuses on zoning as well as other matters regarding the growth and development of the city. And the Board of Adjustments would hear requests from the citizens dealing with the comp plan, ordinances, grants, things of that nature. So at this point, we are going to talk about the dark past of zoning, and Ms. Natalie Ayers will take over from here.
She's so calm. When I get excited, I talk fast, so I'm going to try to talk calm like Adriana, because I want you guys to get the information and to pass that information on to other people that you're going to come in contact with. Okay, so as we know, zoning has been a tool of oppression that's been used in the United States. And because we're in Lubbock, it's also something that's been used in Lubbock. Baltimore established the first racial zoning ordinance in 1910, and while the Supreme Court ruled that these ordinances were unconstitutional in 1917, it did not stop other cities from passing these same particular ordinances. Cities across the South passed segregation ordinances, and Lubbock, as they mentioned earlier, passed their first ordinance in 1923. In 1923, Baltimore passed a comprehensive zoning ordinance to concentrate industrial zoning in Black and brown communities, and the purpose of that was to expel the Black people and brown people from those communities and to replace them with those factories. And again, Lubbock adapted that same racial segregatory practice in 1923, and that's what we've seen in the prior maps, and we'll see it in other maps. This is Lubbock's the 1923 ordinance that was passed March 8th by the then Mayor Spencer, I can't see that, and I have glasses, I'm gonna look up here. That last section 4 is what we wanna look at, where it states that the fact that Negroes and persons of African descent and persons containing as much as 1/8 Negro blood are residing in various portions of the city and their residence is dangerous, saying that those folks are dangerous to the health and pollution of the earth and atmosphere, and creates an emergency and necessity that the removal of the charter requiring an ordinance to be read at several meetings. So basically, this ordinance that was passed in 1923 by Mayor Percy and approved by the city attorney Souter was saying that black people were pollutants. So it was okay for them to be around those industries, okay? And away from white people, because we were also a pollutant to the white people and to the atmosphere. This is the city's 1943 zoning map. So we'll pay attention to that area, that divide there, and it'll make more sense in just a second. In 1943, the city stated that certain areas where black and brown people were was not desirable for businesses or for an expansion of more businesses. That those areas were not expected to encourage an extension, and we can see that in the communities. We don't see a lot of businesses or great, business schools or things like that, and it shows up until 2020 how that still affects us today. Yes. Okay. This is the 1959 plan, and what Ms. Edwards mentioned, we all agree, and they also stated in 1959 that a healthy urban environment is a result of certain basic attributes. Proper environment for a home is a neighborhood that's free from odor, sound, sights of industry. And they also mentioned that heavy industries are known to emit smoke, dust, odor, or noise, and are hazardous by nature. This is the 1966 census tract for the black population. And you can see that majority of the black population in 1960 was in this particular area right here, where it was 83.80%. This is the census tract for 1980 for the Hispanic and Latino census tract. And you can see where the majority of the Hispanic and Latinos resided, okay? So if you look at that map, this map, and I want you guys to kind of envision those two on top of the next map, okay? This is the 1959 proposed land use map, and that dark gray area is industrial, okay? So as you can see, remember the prior two maps, where you have where it's predominantly African American and predominantly Hispanic, where do you see the concentration of heavy industry? This is a 1986 land use plan. The prior one, the one on the left, is at that time the existing land use. And as black and brown people start to reside closer to the other portion, you see the difference in the land use, how it changed. And that's when you start to see the grade or concentration of the heavy industry, where you don't see it in any other areas except for those specific areas. And this is a 2040. This is what the city is saying, like Ms. Edwards stated. The city has made plans to say, this is what we want our city to look like in the year of 2040. This is 2020, so that's 20 years from now, is what the city's saying, this is how we want our city to look. Take a look at the map. So, the heavy industry is still in those areas. Industrial land use is still in those particular areas. When we see the expansion of businesses and things in the south and west side, there's hardly any purple, so that's self-explanatory. Now, can communities use zoning to solve the problems of the past? And that answer is yes. There's a couple solutions. The city can do something called down zoning, whereas what that is where you see industries that are there that perhaps haven't been used in maybe a year. The city can come in and say, okay, we're going to down zone that to commercial, so that no new industry can come in there. Because right now, we're so industry, if a new, even though it hasn't been in use for a year, a new industry can come in and say, okay, this is already zoned industry, so we want to bring a new industry in this community. So the city can downzone that where no new industry can come into the community. The city can also do something called amortization. We have businesses that are grandfathered, they've been here for quite a while. The city can go into those companies and say, okay, we know that business is in business to make money. Based on, how much profit you make or what you're projected to make, this is how much it's gonna cost for you to recoup your profit, but after this time frame, say 10 years, you need to leave. So the city can do those things. They can also do something, what they call buffering, which is they can have those places that have no fences, that's just an eyesore in the community. They can make sure that they have better landscaping, fencing requirements, but the question then becomes still, how is the air quality? While we may put a buffering or a fence, some of those things still go into the air. So those are things that we as a community have to consider. And also increased code enforcement. Now the city has several opportunities to right the past of those wrongs. So it's not, of course we know that the city is not responsible for what happened in 1923. However, the city has an obligation to ensure that those things don't continue. They had opportunity during the comprehensive plan, during the CPAC, which some of you probably were a part of. They had an opportunity during the analysis of impediment. They had an opportunity during the consolidated plan process. So the city has had several opportunities to right those wrongs. Now, the Fair Housing Act of 1968 requires that cities or states that take federal money, that they affirmatively further fair housing. This was put into place to ensure that these racist practices would not continue. If they took that money, they had to make sure they were not excluding protected classes. They had to ensure that they were turning concentrated areas of poverty into areas of opportunity. Federal community development grant money consists of the community development block grants, home funds, ESG, that's what that money consists of. But I want you guys to keep in mind that again, if the city was to receive that money, they had to ensure that there was no type of discriminatory practices on the books, right? So for example, if you work for a company and you have integrity, which I'm sure all of you do, and you had someone who did not have great integrity, and they were responsible for a report, you knew that they turned that report in and it was not correct. You knew that that was not correct, right? So if they turned that report in incorrect, I would hope that you with integrity would let someone know and bring it to their attention, right? So in order for, again, the city to receive that money, they had to ensure that all of those dots were, those I's were dotted, those T's were crossed, okay? Now HUD is in charge of distributing these funds, but again, HUD does not review the AI unless someone brings it to their attention. So just like that employee, if no one brings it to the company's attention, how are they gonna know that there are some integrity issues, right? So in order for HUD to take a look at that process and say, oh, the analysis of impediment wasn't completed based on situations that are still discriminatory, which we saw from the zoning practices, they're not gonna take a look at it unless we say something about it. Again, there was obvious oversight during the meetings. The analysis of impediment, several issues were not, there was plans to make plans. There was no actionable plans put in place. Brought it to attention of the city, and basically we were told that our comments were not relevant, okay? Now, based on all of this information, the question now comes to us as the community, because we have a vested interest in these communities, right? So our question to ourselves and to each other is, has the city done a good job of protecting the safety and health and welfare of all of its citizens? Or has it simply adapted those same racist practices of the past by failing to make necessary changes? Now, we're the ones to be the judge of that. Thank you.
Next, we'll have Ms. Cortez. What Ms. Cortez is going to do is she's going to tell her story of how things have been in her neighborhood, and her story you'll see that it's similar to a lot of other people in different parts of North and East Lubbock. Ms. Cortez.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Laura Cortez, and I live in District 1. I am a homeowner, and my house is located in the corner of Baylor and Avenue O. Some of the things that I can see from my location, I see the concrete batch facilities, the grain elevators, the railroad tracks, a wholesale distributor, a petroleum facility, and a concrete crushing company. This is a small summary of what exists around the area where I live. Some of you in District 1 and District 2 might have a different perspective of your neighborhood, but the bottom line is that we have a mix of industrial with residential. For those of you that may not be aware, the City Council on December 2018 voted unanimously to adopt the 2040 Comprehensive Plan, a document with recommendations presented by the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee, which we call CPAC. A committee comprised of some 30 members, a majority appointed by members of the City Council. It is my understanding that more than 18 months of collaboration with residents, businesses, consultants, board members, city staff, and decision makers happened prior to the city announcing the adoption of the Lubbock 2040 Comprehensive Plan. I attended only one of these meetings, which was the only one I heard about, and it was held at the Civic Center on October the 15th of 2018. The CPAC meeting the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee was meeting the very next day to review and prioritize their recommendations. I spoke with one of the City Council members over concerns voiced that night by residents of North and East Lubbock, because I was afraid that the Advisory Committee's list of priorities that would later be submitted to the Council would not include our concerns. I was informed by the Council member that the City Council had the final vote and say on those recommendations. My question was not necessarily about who made the final vote, but rather would our concerns, which several residents voiced that night, would be taken under recommendation and consideration. Remember, I'm from District 1, so I'm referring to what was happening in our district during this timeline. How many of you remember when all of the Ken Hans Senior Citizen Hotel Development Project on 3rd Street came up? That incident and the formation of CPAC were all happening simultaneously. I feel, now listen very closely because this is only my opinion, I feel very strongly that our focus was intentionally diverted. At that time, I was focusing my attention on the school board's selection of a new superintendent. Even though both of my sons are now grown men and are not in school, I strongly feel that not just administrators, teachers, parents have a commitment to our children, but so does the community. So other than these two incidents, I was unaware and completely caught off guard when I found out about the committee, the CPAC committee, and what their responsibilities and duties were. Now this letter, right here that I have here, is also in this document, which is the comprehensive plan. And this letter is from our mayor, and it's addressed to the citizens of Lubbock. And in the second paragraph on line 1, it says, this document is the city's first comprehensive planning effort in more than 30 years. The last sentence in that same paragraph says, it will be our city's essential documents as Lubbock continues to grow and develop. The 30 years and Lubbock continues to grow and develop are essential. I hope you heard that. First of all, the land use map has changed very little since 1943 in North and East Lubbock. The growth that has primarily happened around our neighborhoods, now again, our neighborhoods, has been the development or continued development of new industry and or expansion of already existing industry. The City Council has done nothing to stop further development, nor did they implement new guidelines on the already existing grandfather clause these factories operate under. Growth and development is happening in West and South Lubbock, and the citizens of Lubbock, we are contributing to their growth when we have to go to that part of the city because we can't get what we need in our neighborhoods. Families in both North and East Lubbock continue to live where there is a high concentration of industry mixed with residential that affects our health and quality of life. Not just odors, dust, pollutants, toxins, and other particles in the air that affect our health. You've got asthma, some of our kids with asthma, allergies, some of our older folks with COPD, and other health problems. I feel that it is imperative for the city to have implemented a long-term study on the health effects of its citizens in these neighborhoods. And that was a recommendation that came from East Lubbock Alliance. Lastly, I would like to say to those who tell me there is nothing we can do, that is only true if you repeat it enough times that you convince yourself, and then you're right, there is nothing you can do. Some of you think that because we tried once and weren't successful, why bother? My answer to you is this. My grandparents and parents never had the opportunity to try. They were too busy working and raising a family to get involved. The lack of an education for some of them, the language barrier didn't help. In my neighborhood, we have several individuals who now have the opportunity of saying, I'm retired, a goal some of our grandparents and even our parents never had the privilege of saying. If you are retired, or if you are a stay-at-home mom, or if you work part-time, and you own a computer or a laptop, I can definitely use you. The greater the number, the better the opportunity for community involvement and awareness of what we can accomplish in our neighborhoods. Always remember that there is strength in numbers, something I was reminded of just this week. When we get residents in District 1 and District 2 showing up in record numbers at city council meetings, town hall meetings, or meetings such as this one, we can make a difference. Something this important that affects us all, public health and safety, quality of life, and economic development. If we can't get the residents from our own neighborhoods to come out and support us in record numbers and look around, how can we expect to make a difference on those who hold the power? We can't give up, and we shouldn't give in. We need to come together and campaign to achieve the same advantages other neighborhoods in Lubbock have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cortez. You know, as other people could say the same thing, you know, we've talked to people, and this was part of the investigation in different areas, and we heard some of the same things. Some of them have had problems now from the pollution, the noise. There's a lot of different things. But the main thing, if you notice on that map, it has got worse and worse. I bought a house in 1971 in an area in Northeast Lubbock that the realtors told me that they was going to develop from the airport on MLK, it was Cork Avenue at that time, all the way down. It never happened. Never happened. In 1966 or 67, you know, we had the integration, we had white flight, and so everything that was supposed to have been started on Northeast and East Lubbock stopped. It stopped, and that's the truth. I've been here for 66 years. I've seen the development. I'm a retired postman. I pay my taxes. I've seen how the city has grown, because I carried mail in those areas. And I see how it's been the same on the east side. There's been some spotting, meaning, you know, a prom here, a prom there. But overall, the development has not happened. So I just wanted to say, that's my story. And I know others have stories about what they have not seen here in Lubbock. At this time, Adam, we'll let him come.
Thank you very much. I'm Adam Hurdle. I'm with Texas Housers. First, I just want to show y'all a few pictures here to acknowledge a lot of the people who've been working on these issues for a long time. You know, this is just, you can't really see it right now, but these are some people that worked on the CPAC when we got involved with the neighborhood associations to try to make some of the changes we've been hearing about today. Had a number of people come out from the community to speak. You know, if you were involved in that, would you just mind standing up right now and just so we can all give you a hand? Ms. Ward, you do. Ms. Capel, Mr. Lozada, get up. These people are real citizens. They've done so much work to solve these issues. And then we got together again when the CPAC didn't go as we wanted to, and we got involved again to try to get this through, the analysis of impediments to fair housing, to get the city to take a look at these issues through the process which HUD had set up. These are some folks that got involved to file this fair housing complaint. There's Ms. Diana Thomas, who lives over in Chapman Hill. Again, I just want to give those people a hand, if you wouldn't mind. So this is why we filed the complaint. So as you've heard, the city has deliberately placed industrial zoning in East and North Lubbock near Black and brown communities for almost 100 years. And the 2040 plan continued this discriminatory practice, and the city refused to acknowledge community comments about this, that the concentration of industry on the east and north side was an impediment to fair housing, was causing a Fair Housing Act violation. So we tried once with the 2040 plan to go through the process that the city provided. We tried again with a process through which the city was applying for HUD funds to make sure they were affirmatively furthering fair housing. They, under that rule, as you heard earlier, they were obligated to follow the Fair Housing Act and eliminate these discriminatory practices. So we tried through that process again. They didn't do it. So what we had to do, we had to, like Natalie said, report to the manager and try to get HUD to come down here and help us work out these problems. So I just want to go through very quickly. We don't have very much time, so I'm sorry, we're gonna have to do the questions and answers outside. There's a new group coming in here at 11. But we have kind of two different claims versus the zoning claim. So under the Fair Housing Act, the city has discriminated by making housing unavailable under the Fair Housing Act, and it's discriminated in the provision of services in connection with a dwelling under the Fair Housing Act. So you can think about intentional discrimination, how the city in 1923 made that ordinance and then continued to concentrate those industrial uses in Black and brown communities. Since that time, that was intentional. There's also a disparate impact, so that means different races or protected classes are treated differently, where most of the white people down in Southwest Lubbock are free from a lot of these industries, while these historically Black and Hispanic communities have to put up with this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And then finally, another claim is a perpetuation of segregation claim. A lot of this zoning, as Natalie told you earlier, was set up to separate Black and brown communities from the white neighborhoods. You'll see that there's a line of industrial zoning in between the white part of the city and the African American Hispanic part of the city. That was set up to segregate. It artificially lowers people's property values, so it's harder to move out. It's harder, it just perpetuates this system that we were supposed to, we made a promise as Americans when we signed that Fair Housing Act that we were going to eliminate this housing discrimination, these things that were set up during the days of Jim Crow. Have we lived up to that promise yet? Do we need to live up to that promise? Yes. We do. So that's why we did this. There were also, I don't want to get too lawyerly on you, but there were also a number of programmatic violations that the city had through this AI process. And I'm just trying to rush through it because we don't have much time, but if you want to get a more detailed explanation, you can talk to me outside. There were Title VI violations because the city denied participation, the benefits of federal funds for protected classes. This AI system was set up so that the citizens have an ability to decide how these federal funds are where they're gonna go, and they also should have input in identifying the impediments to fair housing, the problems that are still existing, and pointing out to the city, hey, there's industrial zoning right next to my neighborhood. This is a violation of the Fair Housing Act. Under the Fair Housing Act, the city has an obligation to come up with meaningful strategies once these are identified through the community process to undo these processes, and the city failed to do that. They failed to affirmatively further fair housing. So I just want to kind of review the timeline real quick. In 2018, December 17th, the city passed the 2040 plan. In July 23rd of 2019, the city passed a resolution approving the analysis of impediments. And after we had participated in both those processes trying to get the city to look at these issues, the NAACP and Texas Housers filed a fair housing complaint with HUD on December 9th. On February 25th, HUD had done some investigation and looking into the complaint, and they sent a copy of that complaint to the city, a notice that we had filed. From that point on, after that February 25th date, the city had 10 days to respond to that complaint. At this point, we have not been in contact with the city, so we don't know if the city has responded or not. But HUD now has 100 days, that's until June 4th, to start conducting an investigation. The goal of the investigation is to reach, first, HUD has to decide if there's an issue here. So they're going to do some of their own investigation. They may refer it to the Department of Justice, and they may do some investigation as well. They're going to determine if our claim is meritorious. And if they do think that it has some merit, they're going to try to solve the process through mediation. So they'll bring both parties together, the city, the NAACP, the neighborhood associations, and others, to come to a mutually agreeable decision. Hopefully that can happen. So they have 100 days to do that. If that 100 days, though, can be extended if it needs to be. And then complainants under the Fair Housing Act can still file their own lawsuit if they're not satisfied with the way that the HUD investigation is going. While the investigation is ongoing, that that 2-year statute of limitations, the time you can file a lawsuit, it's stopped, so it doesn't count. So the fact that we've made a complaint won't hurt anybody that wants to bring their own lawsuit. So we asked for a couple of remedies, but we're going to need your input to determine if these are the right ones, especially people living in mostly affected neighborhoods. We wanted to remove some of that industrial zoning in your neighborhoods. We wanted to adopt an amortization schedule that Natalie was talking about earlier, so some of these industries could be removed. Adopt environmental standards and better codes for existing uses. Create and fund and carry out a remediation plan, so a lot of these old industries that are now abandoned, find a way to get those removed. Create and fund the neighborhood planning program. That was one of the recommendations of the 2040 plan. And the city has committed to do that down the line, but at this point it hasn't been funded. We want to make sure that they do fund that program, and then allow the city to build more affordable housing in other parts of the city to end that segregation. And I'm sure that y'all have a bunch of different ideas. At future meetings, we need to come together and discuss ideas that you may have that you want out of this. So I just want to say, in the little time we have left, to don't wait on the complaint while this process is going. I highly recommend you to get involved with the group, with the NAACP, with the neighborhood associations, and start working to get the city to pay attention, to get involved with the NAACP, to join up with them in this fight. Stay involved in this. And there are a bunch of different things aside from this complaint that the neighborhood association is working on right now. If you live in Dunbar, for instance, next week at the Dunbar Manhattan Neighborhood Association here, a professor from Texas Tech is helping the neighborhood start a preliminary neighborhood plan to identify other issues that the neighborhood's facing and hopefully come up with some solutions that we can implement, or the city can implement. So stay involved. And again, you can join up with the NAACP, you can contact me. If you put your email address down there, I'll keep you in the loop about future events so that you can stay involved in that. And then join up with your neighborhood association. The next NAACP meeting, if you want to attend that, this typing is kind of small, it's going to be March 21st at, what time is it? It's at 11 o'clock. And it's at 8240 Boston Avenue behind United in Tinseltown. And if you've written your email address down there, we can send you some information so that you can have that address. If you wouldn't mind, we have to move out of here to Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm gonna pass it on.
Thank you. Let me just kind of, in closing, just say some things. A lot of times when disagreements come about and grievances come about, a lot of people think they're personal. They're not personal. This is not personal. This is the right of the citizens on this side of town to voice their opinion about things that are happening within the city. They have that right. You have that right, okay? You are the aggrieved. So, a lot of times when two parties can't come together, you need a mediator. So this is where now we're taking it to a mediator. And whatever the mediator decides, we'll go with it. We'll go with it. But we want our rights, our civil rights, done with equality, equal to everyone. And so this is why we've decided to do this. A lot of people don't understand these type of things, but you know, you have a right to say what's on your mind, and we want you to do that. According to Amendment number 1, the rights of religion to express your views. It says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the rights of people to peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. And that's what we're doing. This is our right. So it's not a issue with any person. So I wanted to make this here clear, because sometimes people get to thinking and they make it personal, and it's not that. I think we've done this here peacefully today, don't you? And we're going to continue to do those type of things. But just because we're doing it peacefully, don't think that we don't want to get our rights taken care of also. It's been a long time. It's been a long time. And people of color, it's time to come together. I hear people all the time talking about unity. Coming together, unity, is always when something has happened. Let's come together. And then it lasts for a month or two. And then you don't hear anything else about it. Well, I tell you this, the Lubbock NAACP is here. And it's going to be here. And as long as I'm president of it, the name is going to stand for something. It's going to have value. And I'm going to try my best to support and protect the rights of any individual or group of citizens who come to us for a complaint or legal redress. That's our purpose. And we're going to do that. And so our time is probably over. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out. I don't know if we have time to do questions in here. It may not be that many, but we want to be able to answer questions.